So I read a little bit about your bio, and I'd like to hear, maybe just a quick overview of your journey and when this whole maybe spiritual path started for you. I know there were some couple interesting points within that we could probably get to, but I'd like to just start there.
My path, my spiritual path, I would say, really opened up when I was young. I was 11 years old. I was suddenly ill and very sick. And my family took me to the doctor, the hospital. I was diagnosed with a very rare form of childhood cancer. And given my parents were given a pretty grave prognosis of chance of living 20%. And interestingly, this new drug came in not long after from Turkey, and my father, being a businessman, just demanded I get everything, and that is now standard treatment for what I went through. But I quickly felt like I was living on a tightrope between life and death, and no one talked to me, no medical staff, my family, no one talked to me about what was happening, and I was so little. And that's when my path opened up. I started out of nowhere to pray, just wanting to live, and had this huge transformative experience that has just cracked me open as a young person.
And that transformative experience was around that age of
Yeah.
11, or you said?
Yeah. 11 years old. I felt like I was walking between life and death, between the treatments and what I was seeing, and being so alone and so scared, and starting to pray, could I please live to be 20 years old? And I didn't tell anyone. And not long after praying, this feeling of just peace poured through my body. It just like took my breath away, and a feeling like I wasn't alone, and a knowing that I was going to live. And that started me on this path of like, why am I here? And I got through all the treatments, and as a teenager started reading books about life and meaning and purpose, and here I am today.
And what was the driving question that you were seeking? Is it understanding life and death? Like what was that burning question from that point?
It's interesting. As an adult, I can look back now and see that I wasn't ready to look inward. I was young and I was a teenager. I actually didn't even dive into truth, like therapy, about what happened to me till my late 20s. So I think I was just searching, like, what does it mean to be alive? And what does it mean to have some kind of faith and purpose and meaning? And I was just, as a teenager, reading philosophy and spiritual books. And yeah, I was just searching for why am I here? What does it mean to be here? Why am I alive?
And have you gotten any closer to that question being answered? It's a hard question to ask.
Here's my takeaway. Be careful what you pray for.
Honestly though, right?
I was just like, whatever you want, this ended up being for me like this God, spirit, energy. I went through, I was in the corporate world, and then I left that to study theology, and where do you want me? And then I became a chaplain. It's like, I never had a chaplain when I was little, and then I became a chaplain. But it all has opened up to this moment, to where I'm at. My new book, Everyday Awakening. It's about what does it mean to be alive. So I guess not a shocker.
Yeah, right. I find it interesting, this idea of trying to find the art in science and the science in art. And it's almost like it makes me wonder if the whole point of the human experience, life, is to almost, maybe you're not supposed to know while you're, going through life. The whole point is to experience and to believe and to feel rather than to know, because if you were all knowing, then you probably wouldn't be having the human experience. Um,
I would agree, but also I think, are you awake for the journey? It's so easy to live in our mind. I think there's so much fear and unrest in the United States. And so many people live head up in their mind, and their mind runs them. So it takes a real consciousness and awareness to be in the present, to be in the moment, the preciousness of life, and being fully here for it and opening. And that, I think, is how we're called to live.
do you think life starts when what realization is made?
I think when you have every one of us, I'm guessing hearing this right now, have had a moment of awe or wonder or time stops, and maybe it's the sun setting or the whistling of the wind through the trees or something where it's just like a moment of just heightened alertness and senses and awareness, like I'm here, just like where you're just intense preciousness of life. I'm talking about that. I'm talking about feeling that, growing that becoming your anchor of living here and now and using your mind, but the anchor is now.
And what does it mean to live? Does it mean to be present?
I think I would say awakening is about being present now into that sense of right now, the preciousness of life and how we're connected with all of us. We're energy connected to the oneness of God, universe, this infinite spirit, and living from there. That's what it means to be fully alive, fully awakened.
Hmm. I would say when I started practicing mindfulness and presence in what I do, slowly the more depressive tendencies of thinking about the past or anxious tendencies about thinking about the future started to, dissipate. And I started to become more just grateful for what's around me at that time. I think it's a powerful byproduct that's not really talked about when it comes to living life fully.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. And I think so much of our suffering, 80, 90, some percent of all our suffering is in our mind.
Yeah.
It's our thinking mind. It's where we get caught up in the past, the future, the what ifs, the how, I mean, I do it too. I catch it. Boom, there my mind goes.
Right.
I come back to the moment and breathe and come into the moment. But it's an awareness and it's a conscious choice.
Right. How do you think purpose ties into being present? How does this work into just the idea of living life fully?
Mm-hmm. I think it's when we're present here and now, which is a practice. I mean, that takes conscious choice to, if it's through your breath, meditation, body, movement, being in nature, just to come back into the moment, being here and opening to just the guidance. We all get guidance, and where, knowing comes in through us, a gut feeling and knowing, some kind of thought drops in of just like, this makes sense. This is where I'm being led. I get guidance every day and I really tune into that. And again, I think we're all guided and can receive guidance, but it's not when we're in our thinking mind.
And what exactly is this intuitive sense? Because I've experienced that many times that my logical brain will try to make sense of what I am intuitively feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned to stop trying to make sense of it and just lean into the intuition. But it still just boggles my mind on what exactly that even means. I
Mm-hmm.
know we have slang for it, like a gut feeling,
Mm-hmm.
but and I know it has to do with the gut microbiome and stuff from a scientific perspective, but from a more spiritual perspective, what is intuition a guidance from our higher self? What do we
Mm-hmm.
what do you think it could be?
I think it's guidance from God, divine. I mean, I've worked with thousands of people, so I think language is limiting. If it's God, infinite spirit, this universal intelligence, opening into that guidance that's here. And it might come through every one of us. It might come through via clairvoyance, kind of a seeing or hearing or sensing. But again, it's really being, I just recently, and I've heard of this for years, but I finally read a little snippet about Einstein and how Einstein got his really core knowings came through him with his inventions was using his, they say it's sixth sense. We're just present and a knowing comes through. And I've had this experience just myself of, a knowing, a feeling, a seeing. I'm a mystic, I'm an intuitive, I see a lot, I get a lot. But again, it's just creating space, mindful practice to just create space to be here now, to be present, to feel, sense, see, hear what's here right now.
Yeah. And I've talked about this story on the show before, but long story short, I think the strongest time I had an intuitive sense was last year when I missed this mass mall shooting by like an hour in Texas. Yeah, it was a random like Wednesday. I went to go make some returns at the mall. It was an outdoor mall, and it was kind of a gloomy day. I made my returns. I didn't really have anything else to do, and I thought, okay, I could walk around, shop a little bit, but I just had some feeling that I need to leave. And I remember looking around at the sky, trying to make sense of why I didn't feel like I need to be there. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember thinking to myself, looks like it's going to rain. I think that's why I don't really want to be here. So I left, and within 60 minutes, there was like this mass shooting. A lot of people got injured, some didn't make it, and that was near Dallas, Texas. So it's so interesting that some could call it a coincidence, but to me, it felt like a gut feeling. It was something saying, hey, this doesn't feel safe. And it boggles my mind because I couldn't even imagine, maybe subconsciously I saw something that was off when I
Mm-hmm.
was walking around the mall that didn't look right. Like, I don't know, but I just find that so interesting, topics like that.
Thank you for sharing. Wow, I definitely think there was guidance there,
Yeah.
guidance for you for sure. And I mean, I've had a few experiences just tangibly I can share where working as a chaplain years ago at our level 1 trauma hospital, and I worked a lot of evenings and night shifts where at night from 11 to 8 a.m. I'd be the only chaplain on for the hospital, and I live about 15 minutes from downtown Minneapolis where the hospital is. And example, a helicopter would go over my house, emergency helicopter. I knew the sound. My pager would go off. I'd have 15 minutes to show up in the typically emergency room, in the stabilization room. Very sacred work. Being with patient family a lot, as you can only imagine, tragedy that happened in the night. And I have memories of 2, 3 in the morning being done, but they didn't have room for us. So I had to go to my car to drive back to my house, even though I was on till 8 a.m. And once in a while, I would feel like I'm ready to be done. I just was like, it was a lot. And I would, if I felt that way, I would say, I'm ready to be done. And I would literally hear, you have one more call, or I would hear, you're done.
Hmm.
This is amazing.
Yeah. Would you say that this intuition is only recognized if you're aware, or can you still get gut feelings as a drifter through life?
I think we all can get a sense, a knowing, a hearing, a gut feeling through our life, but I think it's really present and we're able to really tune in and receive it when we're not caught up in our fast chattering ego mind that's just go, 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 and so busy. And then, our whatever, we start to feel fear or worry or anxious, and then it triggers that emotion, the chemical response in our body. I mean, it's all connected. So yeah, I do think the present moment is key to just be able to sense and feel and hear guidance.
And I've observed people that are religious, but maybe not spiritually awakened. So it almost makes me wonder that they're separate. Like, what exactly then is consciousness, right? Is it aware of your ego? Exactly. Where is that line drawn? If there are people that are, more in tune with the religious side, but still aren't that spiritually awakened yet.
Mhm.
So what do we think is the subconscious? Is that just a letting the ego drive over?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting question. I think there's such a range of faith and faith traditions and how people practice. I mean, even just the fact that, 1 out of 4 people in the world are Christian. That means 3/4 of the world's not Christian. And just, is there an openness in what you believe and faith backgrounds? And I think amidst just, Christianity, there's such a breadth of faith, from really conservative to really liberal. And in all traditions, not just Christianity, I think it's easy to put beliefs or God, divine, whatever, in a box, or like, this is how you practice, this is what you do.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I went to a liberal graduate theology and divinity school. I have a master's in theology and divinity. And the first weeks, the professors were like, well, what do you believe and why? Let's look at it. And so, but I think many people who have a faith and maybe go to a church, they just think they have to believe what the minister says and this is it. And well, can there be an openness? And just like in any line of work, I mean, you'll see people that are really kind of awake and in tune and open, and others that are closed and live life more rigidly. I mean, it is interesting, and I think it applies for all the different work and, lines of work that we can fall into.
I often say that to me, it seems like religion is more like a channel to consciousness, the unified field or whatever energy. And these big major religions are all just channels to the same source. And I think what's interesting about human nature is once somebody finds something that works, we want other people to do it and see if it works. And I think the more collective consciousness that's like, oh, this is working, now you have these groups of major religions. And I think I'm sure at some point people thought one was better than the other, right? We've seen that plenty of times, but like you said, I think it's just more of a way to channel to this energy that
Mm-hmm.
people experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would add that I think people can have a hard time with the word religion. I think of more man-made doctrine, dogma. I really like the word spirituality. What gives you meaning? And what is that? I just think it's more broad and open. But there's actually a word for what you just described, which when I learned this in graduate school, I was like, yay, thank you. The word is called religious pluralism, and how there's all these faiths, if it's Christian or Buddhist or Hindu, Native American, I mean, all the breadth of traditions, but they all come together in one main endpoint. And when I learned that, I thought, that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, even when you look at the core tenets of multiple religions, they, to some extent, have a lot of parallel to them.
Absolutely.
And and yeah, they might have differentiators and then subcategories within a major religion, but
Mm-hmm.
it seems like they're all just trying to maneuver through life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me too, especially growing up in the US and seeing so many different types of people, it forced me to look at the, I don't want to say problem, but the idea in a different way,
Mm-hmm.
right? To see that, okay, well, how can someone who's so strongly Christian and someone who's so strongly Hindu both be right, or are they both wrong, right? And then it almost makes you reframe the question as not whether it's right or wrong, but what is it doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. There's so much crossover, and I've studied world religions, and I work with people about faith backgrounds. I'll share just one learning years ago that was also super helpful to me. Ken Wilber, who's an author, spiritual author. I really like his work. And years ago, I remember reading how he defined spiritual maturation in 4 ways. The first way he talked about was egocentric. It's all me, 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 me. The second way is ethnocentric. So it's like, it's my tribe, I'm Jewish or I'm Buddhist, or, a certain definition of your tribe. And this is how you live. This is your definition. The third is world centric, attuned to the whole world. And the fourth is cosmocentric. So the world and beyond. And I thought, that's so lovely.
It sounds like each step becomes more liberating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I also think it's more, it also just, to me, it just seems like more abundant of an energy, because when you've boxed yourself to the me, 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 you're so closed off to the rest of the world. which means you don't allow for things to flow as they should. You're trying to take control of something quite honestly you have zero control over.
Yep.
I mean, we live on this space rock that's, spinning through what we call space time, which we don't even, there's so much we don't understand at a macro and micro level. I thought the most interesting thing, so I wanted to be a doctor most of my life, and I studied pre-medicine. And after 4 years, I was about to go to med school and I switched paths. But in that time period, I studied anthropology and theology. So definitely like some concepts you were talking about, made sense to me. But I bring all this up because I remember my first day of college, and this was like within the first week or month of taking chemistry. They had talked about this experiment. It's called the double slit experiment. And basically, long story short, they found that the electron, when observed by a camera, operated differently at a micro level than it did when it wasn't being observed.
Mm.
So when it was being observed, I think it operated like a wave, and when it wasn't, it operated like a particle. So
Mm.
it literally changed the way it was operating based on if it was being observed or not. I remember the professor saying that, and I was like, okay, next lesson. And I remember thinking, did anybody just catch what just happened? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And that sounds pretty big to brush over. And I think that really does. It's interesting, right? Science is trying to understand the world, and so is spirituality.
Mm.
But science won't accept something until it's proven, but they also understand that things are constantly disproved,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and I think from a spiritual sense, if you look at the double slit experiment, it almost seems like you are manipulating your surroundings based on how you think and interact.
Very interesting. I remember a professor in graduate school made the comment once. He's like, as much as you can, decide to believe or not believe. It's like, I mean, it's a choice, one side or the other. As much as you can prove there is a faith or isn't a faith. I mean, it comes down to a decision and a choice. And
Mm-hmm.
I would add to that experience. I mean, I had
Right.
that visceral experience, and I've had many, many since that. It's just like, I just know that we're connected. There's a force of energy within and without. I mean, even now they have research, we're energy, our aura is energy. We're all interconnected.
Mm-hmm. That stuff is very fascinating to me because I also saw that grounding, right, your feet to the earth has an effect
Mhm.
on removing oxidative stress from your body. So
Mhm.
it's unfortunate because especially even me growing up through the medical, pathway and everything, it was so looked down upon to think differently.
Mhm.
We weren't encouraged to think differently. I think it almost felt like a pressure from society, but it's really just your peer group to conform.
And when you really think about health, well-being, we're holistic, mind, body, spirit. You can't separate the body from emotions, from, the spiritual essence. I mean, it's all interconnected. And I've seen many people in the work I've done over many years who may be emotionally, spiritually, extremely, upset, distraught, and then there are physical ramifications. I mean, it's all interconnected.
Yeah. Now, you said you worked with a lot of clients in the past.
Mhm.
What what is a commonality problem that people were experiencing when they came to you?
I mean, different from my days as a chaplain, and I was a hospice chaplain then for many years, and then the work I do now. I'll share with you when I was a chaplain, and a hospice chaplain. Many people I saw, witnessed, it was really amazing. The last days of their life, there was just an opening, an awareness of like, oh, this is life and the preciousness of life. And then they would die. And that was honestly some of the impetus of writing my book. It's like, you don't have to wait till end of life or you're in crisis, you're upheaval. You can choose right now to feel into the moment, to the preciousness of life. You can feel that. in my private practice today, I work with people emotionally, spiritually, and I have quite a number of people I work with who land on my doorstep, and we work together, who may be really successful executives or attorneys, doctors, and they've made all this money, but they feel numb. They feel empty. They feel sadness. They feel there's a longing. And just even helping them realize, wow, you're so much more than your mind. And just coming into the moment is just, I've had many people like, "Oh, wow." So,
There really is nothing like feeling fulfilled. I
uh,
mean, and I think most of us were never really taught what that meant because each generation has stuff to unpack. And if they don't, it gets pushed to the next person. And I think without the right tools of being, okay, this is what true fulfillment feels like, we think it's the cars, the money, the watches, the house. And then you get those things eventually, and you're like, it's fun for the day, the week, the month, or whatever, right? You're like, oh my God, I did it. It's awesome. I manifested it and all these things. And then you're like, okay, but there's still something missing,
yeah.
right? And I think that's the piece where people are like, that doesn't make any sense to me because I worked so hard. I got the thing that I wanted. And why am I still feeling like there's something missing? And I think if people don't stop and reflect, then they tend to chase the next thing because they think it's the bigger thing that they're missing.
Yep. Yep. And I find, people moving towards this path of opening, awakening to the precious of life. People come to it through crisis upheaval. I mean, that's how I came through some people come through many feeling like a longing. There's something missing. They're unhappy. The fourth car didn't do it. And
Right.
then there's a group that of people I think that have a steep meditation or yoga practice, and they just keep opening into it. But I actually, to share for a moment, it was so rich of an experience with my mother-in-law 20 years ago, and she was a big person on my path to choose studying theology and becoming a chaplain. She 64, turning 65. She was also gravely ill, pancreatic cancer. There was nothing they could do. My father-in-law asked me to be with her to help her with all her appointments. And she did everything from medical doctors to everything alternative. And she was a person, her name's Karen, who was really defined by the external world, money, all that stuff. And in that year, to see it all drop away, it didn't matter. It all dropped away to the moment, days, and the day I was with her when she died, to the moment she took her last breath. It was just like this emanating love and light around her that was just magical. It was just like, wow, just the essence of what it means to be here, and that we're love, and love is it, and love is the answer. And that just guided me the impetus of like, wow, I guess I really want to work with people, in this field and end of life. But it was just a magical experience and a teaching and a learning on the power of love and why we're here.
Love is a very scary emotion because it's so strong. Um, it's a very, I think maybe potent is an even better word for it because even to the point of self-love, there's
Uh,
something incredibly powerful about feeling comfortable being alone, being with yourself, being happy with yourself, right? There's some strong inner peace that I think arises from that.
mhm. I think love is the reason we're here, to learn to love. And I think what we take with us when we die is our ability to love. And it is about starting first growing self-love. The more love we have within, I think the more love we can give to one another. And
Right.
it's practice, and it's a choice. And in fact, in my book, Everyday Awakening, I have one of the practices is embodying love. And we can all learn if it's a breath, meditation, affirmation. And this is something I really worked on years ago. Like, I want to feel more love. And we can all choose that and learn to love more and learn to open our hearts.
And I would argue that a lot of today's problems stem from that, whether you're chasing validation from others or a partner, or you haven't resolved some issues. So there's a lack of self love. So you numb the pain through either drinking, drugs, you know, wasting time on social media, whatever it is.
Mhm.
I think a lot of the numbing and the chasing and the seeking is a result of what you just said, is the trying to resolve some inconsistency of maybe lack of love or a confusion on something they haven't resolved yet.
Mhm. Mhm. And I would say ancient religion, spiritual texts, they all talk about love, opening to love, or the opposite, fear, getting caught up in the fear and the unrest. And even to this day, I mean, here in the US, the election we just went through, I mean, there's so much upheaval externally and internally. And it's a choice to say, okay, amidst if the election was what you wanted or not, but how can I just be grounded and regulated and be able to find my peace within my being amidst whatever's happening out in the world.
Yeah, I'd say that's partially my frustration with how we've been operating as a country in the US over the last several elections, to my knowledge, is regardless of who becomes president, it seems like we have a strong polarization when after the decision has been made, we should unify, regardless, because we can't go backwards. I mean, it's too late now. The only thing we can do is open arms and help your neighbor type, I think, philosophy.
hmm Yeah, again, choices, choices. How are we living every single day?
Yeah. Well, Catherine, as you know, this show is called Learn or Be Learned. So I love to ask my guests this closing question, which is, what is a life lesson that you've learned that you would like to end this talk on?
I think we are, every one of us, everyone hearing this podcast right now, we're all choosing to open, to grow, to become more vibrantly alive and feel into what it means to really be here on this earth, connecting with this universal energy, or we're choosing subconsciously not to. And just tuning in, where are you? And I know life can be challenging and messy and difficult and so easy. I understand to shut down, close off. But at the end of the day, how are you choosing to live? And it's a choice, it's a practice. I think people are longing for more peace and it's here, but it's a practice, it's a choice every day to open into, to grow, to keep learning, and to feel that preciousness of life, which is here for all of us.
I agree. I would say to add on is everything you said, but like you said, the choice is yours and you need to take that first step,
hmm
right? There is resources, there is healing. You have a book, there's many resources out there, and change is scary, but if you don't take that first step, life is going to flash it before your eyes before you know it. And the scariest thing is regret because you
hmm
can't redo it, at least not in this lifetime.
just being open, like I witnessed at end of life with people, an awareness, like an awakening before they die. It was just like, oh, wow. And then their life is over and we can all experience all of this now. Now it's all here.
Well, Catherine, thank you so much for being on this show and sharing your vulnerability with us. And I think, it's very powerful. So thank you.
Yeah, great to meet you. Thank you for having me on.